Progress is never linear, folks, and it was a scrappy old display in Sydney tonight for the British Lions. The final whistle's just gone, and spoiler alert, press pause if you don't want to know the result, but the Lions won 21 points to 10. Hello amateurs, welcome back to the channel. I'm going to be here with you throughout the Lions series and beyond, so hit subscribe to follow along. Alrighty, a couple of things pre-game. Henry Pollock ruled out with just a slight calf strain. They didn't want to risk him, so Cummings came into the second row and Captain Ty Byrne moved to the blind side. Cummings, by the way, who went on, I think, to have a really good game. I was so sad for him after the way the kickoffs went in his previous game. I thought he had a really strong outing tonight, so it was good to see, especially at short notice as well. Fantastic stuff. Some more stuff in the pre-game, and this is around Sam Warburton, actually, who declared that the Lions will win during the pre-game. And I know he's paid to give his opinions, and that clearly is his opinion, but I think he's also paid to big up the game, to try and build some excitement. And I think by doing that, you could lose people. You could lose people watching the game, because immediately you think, well, why are we watching them? Because people watch sport for jeopardy. And if one of the commentators or pundits is saying there's no jeopardy, then why would you watch? Just a little bugbear of mine there. Let's get that one out of the way. But that also, I mean, the atmosphere seemed a little bit flat again in the stadium. I think I've seen that in most of the games on tour at the moment. And it could be because of the expectation that the Lions will win. Again, though, as soon as the home side got into their stride and sort of made some dents and sort of bashed the Lions a little bit, the atmosphere improved and we saw some improved play in that respect. Okay, where there definitely was some atmosphere was after 7 minutes when Owen Farrell got shown on the big screen. And I thought this was a lovely moment, a very pantomime moment also, because, you know, there were cheers and then some people started booing and you could see Will Stewart sat behind him, being the pantomime villain as well, and everybody loved it and was having a good time. So that was good to see. I'd imagine it's something they might well have spoken about in camp, you know, the drama and the contentious nature of his inclusion. So it was great to see them all having a good time with it in the stadium. But this was a scrappy game. There's no way around it. I've just heard Alex Mitchell say in his post-match interview saying the ball was quite greasy. And it did look like that. I think the Lions dominated territory and possession for most parts of this first half, to be honest. But the detail at the breakdown was badly missing. So many of the rucks were scrappy. They sent individual carriers into contact quite often without close support. And that, of course, just gives those Waratah jackalers opportunities to get in there and steal the ball. Gamble for the Waratahs was a nuisance all night with that. It was a mess for the Lions. And I've got to say, off the back of that, Mitchell and Finn Smith didn't have their best game. They looked rushed. It didn't look well-oiled like it normally does with them. And in the pre-game, I said that's what I wanted to see from this back line. I was really excited about the combinations that the Lions were putting out in this game. And I thought, based on all the football ability, that they could really break loose. It didn't really happen at all throughout the entire game for the Lions on this night. However, after a couple of minutes, there was a brilliant example. It's something that Andy Farrell might well highlight. Scott Cummings got all the way back after Keenan had dropped a pass. It was hacked through and it was Scott Cummings, a big second row, got all the way back to clear up. Huge effort, and that's what the Lions need. Effort on effort on effort. There was a moment after 9 minutes when Mac Hansen threw a pass over the top to Ben Earl, and that's his point of difference as a winger on this tour. That's why he'll be picked, because he's got that ability. However, Mac did not have his best game tonight. I'm a huge Mac Hansen fan. I love what he's all about, but he made a few errors. He didn't look effective. He got banged over for a disallowed try. And yeah, it was not his finest outing. And actually, it might be the worst game I can remember seeing him play. So that's sad for him. But that pass was excellent. And it went to Ben Earl, who I pointed out in the pre-game. I thought he needed a big game, and I thought he was incredibly busy tonight. I thought he carried the ball a lot. And as the game wore on, those carries got more and more effective. That's what Ben Earl's all about. Aside from a couple of early penalties, I thought he had a pretty strong game. Another person to have a very strong game I thought was Hugh Jones, obviously with the 2 tries, but I just thought generally his handling, his decision making, he was strong on defence as well. I thought all round he had a really strong outing, and he got his first try after 12 minutes from the classic Hugo Pilotu move where Pilotu takes it to the line, looks out the back and then hits Jones flat. Will Greenwood was trying to say that defensively that's a very simple thing, just hit your man at half time, and on the face of it that's correct. But these guys have successfully pulled that move off in international rugby repeatedly for many years. So is it that easy? Maybe it's not that easy. Just before the 20-minute mark, this kind of summed up a lot of what the Lions were doing. They just looked hurried when they were attacking. They were on the within the 5 metre line of the Waratahs, bashing away, but they just looked hurried. They just need a little bit of composure there, I thought. And yes, speed of ball's important, but what's more important there is retaining the ball and building pressure. And I just felt they looked hurried. I felt like they put themselves under pressure when there was no need to. Again, this was a point where they were sending individual players into contact without close support, and there's no reason to do that when you're close to the line unless you're passing to score, and that wasn't the case in that scenario. However, on the plus side, the set piece was really good. Line out was rock solid. Scrum was solid at this point, but not dominant. That would change as the game went on. Okay, into the second sort of 20 minutes of this first half. And there was and again, a symptom of what I've just been talking about. There was a great jackal turnover to the Waratahs, and it was because Lions sending individual runners in, looking a little bit disorganised. Mitchell and Smith just hurried, I would say. There was a try by Gamble from a line-out drive, which was chalked off for the Waratahs. Ran over Hansen. Mitchell didn't really stand a chance, but it was chalked off a line-out obstruction by the TMO, and the Lions would have the exact call against them later in the game as well. The TMO was very busy, I would say, in this game. He put himself involved quite often. Hugh Jones got his second try shortly afterwards, though, and this was another thing that we're seeing a lot from the Lions, and this has been a real consistent high point of the tour, I would say. So they go one way, come back the other. They have 3 flat runners to the line, and then it's up to the scrum half to hit whichever one he wants. And in this case, it got flashed across the front of one player. Beelum let it go, and it was Hugh Jones who caught and had amazing footwork to get a one-on-one and get over the line. 14-0 after half an hour, and that felt about right, to be honest. The Lions have been completely dominant, but had made a few errors. Derby Lancaster got a try shortly afterwards, and another sort of theme partly through this game was that the Lions were receiving the kickoffs. They were catching them this time after messing up short ones in one game, messing up long ones in another. They were catching them, but they weren't getting their exits right. There was a couple where the ruck was just a bit messed up. Again, breakdown messy for the Lions all night long. There was a couple where Mitchell didn't really get his clearance kick long enough. And yeah, this one was a messed up ruck, and it led to Taniela Tupu coming back down the blind side, doing a lovely little pump and then pass. But Finn Smith, really, it was a poor defensive decision for me. Cowan Dickey had that tackle. Finn Smith should have had his shoulders pointed to the outside and then just push out, use the touchline and make the tackle. But then Lancaster also got over Hugo Keenan, and yeah, you expect Keenan to make that tackle. You expect all fullbacks to make that tackle, really, and he just didn't hold him. He just bounced him a little bit and scrambled to the line. There was a TMO review about the clear out at the previous ruck. People in the studio thought that it was probably illegal. I thought that it was probably okay. I thought it was a dynamic, very dynamic movement. I think it was Hansen who got cleared out, and I think he moved late, and I think the Waratahs player was going one shoulder and then had to use the other. I don't know. I was okay with it myself. Yeah, there was head contact, but he was really low. He's just trying to clear a player. I don't think he targeted the head at all. I think it was just a rugby incident. And on that incident, I think the referee called it right. Certainly it's the way I'd like the game to be refereed. Okay, get to half time. Things to pick out. I thought James Ryan's tackling was absolutely superb. People talk about big tall men getting low. The height of his tackling was awesome, and he absolutely banged back a couple of lads. I thought Cummins in the second row had a really good outing, calling the line-outs. The line-outs looked great, and a lot of good involvements around the park as well. And Ben Earl, ball in hand, looked good as well, aside from those few penalties. Okay. Also, the Waratahs, it's got to be said, the Waratahs did defend well. Yeah, they weren't getting broken through the middle, and I wanted the Lions to be a bit more direct in the second half because they just needed to suck them in a little bit to create more opportunities. But the Waratahs did defend pretty well in that first half. All we need is a good start to the second, and this was one of the examples where the Lions caught the restart, but then didn't exit cleanly. It was a poor kick from Mitchell, but somebody was ahead of the ball and ran forwards and gave away the penalty. Kick to the corner, line out, catch and drive for the try by the Dobbins, the hooker. And suddenly it's 10-14, 2 tries apiece. And this game was really in the balance. I mean, the Lions were looking dominant, but they weren't able to finish off what they started, basically. So it was tense times. If the Waratahs have found a little bit of form and they found a way to get into the game, it could have been tough for the Lions, but they didn't. Mitchell, who, as I've outlined, did have a tough first half, I thought. But he made a great break, got it to Kinghorn, who got it to Van der Fleer, and so very nearly scored in the corner. And again, I thought they should have checked this, but the referee made a great, really accurate call. It was so close to the goal line, but he was absolutely right that Van der Fleer did knock it on. So well done the referee for making a brave early call on that one. There was a brilliant pass, and this goes to show why all these coaches think that Ben Earl could certainly fill in the centre and potentially play in the centre. It was a brilliant face pass across somebody from Ben Earl to Mac Hansen. And then Hansen, it was on penalty advantage, so I've got some sympathy. But it was a funny little kick into the in-goal area. The execution wasn't great, and I'm not sure the decision was right either. I think I'd have liked him to have step back in field and just try and get a few more phases if he didn't score himself. Load of subs came on after that. 1, 2, 3, 5, 15. Yeah, empty the bench at the 15-minute mark, which has been common across this series from the Lions. And again, another thing that Cummins did shortly afterwards, which I love. I love intelligent rugby players. And the Waratahs had a free kick deep inside their 22. And Cummins rightly knew that as soon as you take, even if you're holding the ball as a player taking the free kick, if you take a step forward, that's you initiating the taking of the free kick. Scott Cummins knew this, charged forward and forced a really poor kick from the Waratahs, which gave the Lions a line-out drive 5 minutes from the line. That got slowed down by the Tars, but this is, again, they're getting good ball now. So Mitchell and Smith suddenly looked a little bit better. And Smith darted back down the blind side. He took Duan van der Merwe with him. Mitchell darted there to go and see him. And with the players sliding, Mitchell made a great decision to just step back in and score himself. It was a lovely try for 21-10. The following kickoff. And this is a real good example of pressure and bringing pressure on yourself or relieving it. So the Lions caught the kickoff. The box kick was a really good height and a really good length. The Lions got up, forced an error, and suddenly it's a scrum to the Lions on halfway rather than scrabbling around in your own 22 for as long as you need to defend for. It's a massive difference. And I think across all of the games, getting these kickoff receipts sorted in terms of catching it and then having a clean exit, I think across all the games, that's their biggest work on, because pulling pressure on yourself when the opposition is just trying to do that anyway, it just makes everything so much harder. So I think kickoff receipts is the single biggest thing for the Lions to improve on. And I mentioned it there. What it did allow the Lions to do is push and force errors. And that was another big plus point, I think, from the Lions today. Obviously, there was a greasy ball about the park, but they made really good decisions about when to push off, jump through the line and continue going forward. It's so easy to go forward that first bit, but then if you just allow the opposition space, then they could potentially get that pass or get that kick deep and escape, but they've got to keep going and going and going. And I think we saw that several times today where they caught the Waratahs way behind the gay line. So that was a positive for sure for the Lions. But yeah, there was with those forwards that came on, I think they just got a little bit more direct. They started to look a bit more powerful. The scrum looked much better. Of course, it's against a tiring Waratahs team, and their bench players are nowhere near as good as their starters. But they did just suddenly look better, and as a result of that, Mitchell and Smith suddenly looked a little bit better as well. They were on the front foot. They were getting cleaner ball, and suddenly they were able to play a little bit. Jack Morgan came on for Van der Fleer, and Marcus Smith came on for Finn Smith afterwards as well. And I've got to say, again, maybe because the ball was cleaner towards the end of the game, but I thought Marcus did really well when he came on. He looked decisive. He fed some beautiful passes. And aside from kicking a penalty dead with the second last play, I thought he had a really strong outing, which of course is what you want to see. I'm pretty sure he's earmarked for that 23 jersey, or a potential for that 23 jersey in the test matches, and you want him to come on and be confident and play the way he did today. It was a lovely minute with Ty Furlong, who'd come on and was pretty dominant at scrum time, it must be said. He got penalised somehow before the scrum, and he basically screamed at his opposition number, "Do you want to scrum?" Because obviously the guy was just trying to muck around with the bind and all this kind of stuff to try and get a penalty, to try and not, actually have to go against this big monster. So I love that. And we've seen it. Who we've seen that from before? Ellis Genge did it, I think, in a Premiership game this year as well. It's such a sort of call out. So I know you're trying to cheat. I know you don't want this. Yeah, it's a great thing. Now, I mentioned the TMO earlier, and it's always up for debate. How much should the TMO intervene? It's a constant discussion. For me, it was too much tonight. I think you let the referee ref the game, and if the referee calls you to make a decision, then you do it. And there's a good example here, because the TMO corrected an error by the referee. It was Hugh Jones reached in and sort of dragged the ball downwards, and the referee thought it was a Waratahs knock on and gave the Lions a scrum, but the TMO corrected it. But there was one like 3 minutes earlier when Mitchell was picking the ball up at the back of the ruck, and it got kicked just before he picked it up. The referee thought it was a knock on, and from his angle, it probably did look like a knock on. But they didn't correct that one. So if you correct one, you've got to correct the other. But for me, I don't want the TMO involved in those kind of things. They're both in the middle of the pitch doing, no real relevance. Let the referee ref the game. Every referee is going to make mistakes or get things wrong. They all balance out by the end of the game, or as close to it. Too much intervention, as far as I'm concerned, from the TMO. Ben White came on shortly after for his Lions debut. Great to see him, and I think he's had such a strong Six Nations. I think he would have been desperately disappointed to miss out on the initial selection, and it absolutely warrants his jersey. So great to see him get on. Ellis Genge got over for a try from a line-out drive, except it wasn't. That was the same one. It was Ben Earl that stepped across the line and blocked the jumper in the line-out initially. That was the second try that Genge had ruled out. He'd almost snuck over for another one, and fair play to the Waratahs scrum half. As Genge was reaching for the line, he had to really reach over his shoulder as well, so it was kind of a difficult placement. And as he did, the scrum half got his hand in there and just knocked the ball loose. You could say Genge error, and of course you want to look after the ball, but it was a forced error, and fair play for the defence in the line for getting that done. Okay, so that was it really. It was a scrappy old affair. There wasn't much flowing rugby in this one. There was more towards the end from the Lions when the game broke up a little bit. But it was a tricky night in terms of conditions. I think it was a tricky night. I think, again, sometimes you look at these games, you think some of these players look like they may be feeling the pressure a little bit. And I sensed that a little bit, possibly. However, just to reiterate, I think I wanted Ben Earl to have a big game in this game. I think he needed it to give himself a chance of being in the Test 23. And I think we saw the best of Ben Earl tonight in terms of his carrying. That's what his point of difference is, that ability to get a ball, do his beautiful hip sway, almost, movement at the line, and then drive through contact. We saw that a lot in the second half particularly. Thought Hugh Jones had a really good all-round game. Excellent hands at times. But what about the commentary? What about Rog in the commentary? At some points, well, actually at a lot of points, it seemed almost like he had a bit of a personal vendetta against Finn Smith today. It seemed like all he was doing was looking at the other options that Finn Smith could have taken and then just pointing them out. I don't know. It's I'm sure it wasn't deliberate, but I thought the criticism, the constant criticism of the decision making of Smith, and they kept sort of saying, "Oh, that will come with experience," almost a little bit condescendingly, in my opinion. Finn Smith's a Premiership winner, like he's an international, and now he's a Lions tourist. I felt like it was a bit much, as far as I'm concerned, in the commentary for that. Alex Mitchell got given Player of the Match. I mean, I questioned that really. I thought he had an excellent start to the second half when the Lions got some better possession. It was difficult for him in the first half, but some of his kicking, when not under a huge amount of pressure, was not good enough today, for sure. I personally would have probably gone with Hugh Jones, I think, but I also thought Scott Cummings had an excellent, solid game as well. So that's where we're at. Big work on kickoff receipts. Another positive was the line speed, as I mentioned earlier. But let's go back to what I said at the start of this episode. Progress is never linear. There's always going to be steps forward, then there'll be little steps back, and then hopefully they'll regather and then push on beyond this today. Keenan and Kinghorn and White all get their first games of the tour, which is good to see. Just one more tourist to start now, or to get his cap, and that is Owen Farrell. That'll happen, I'm sure, either Wednesday or next Saturday. And I think the Lions just push on. You know, I think kickoff receipts is the biggest thing they need to fix. So we'll see how that goes. What do you think? Let me know in the comments down below. Who impressed you from the Lions today? What do you think the biggest issues are? Are there any things that I haven't seen that you think are really important? I'd love to hear it in the comment section down below. I learn every single video I put out. Somebody writes something in the comment section that makes me go, oh yeah, I hadn't thought of that. So is that going to be you for this one? While you're down there, give this video a thumbs up if you don't mind. It helps other people find it, and you can subscribe there. You can watch that one next, and don't forget to get out and play.